We got a great one for you today. The year 1980 was a fascinating time for music. I mean, the decade was ushered in by some bold songs by artists that push their own boundaries to stay relevant, but it really challenged their fans. You'll see what I mean. It's also a year that gave us some of the most influential and timeless tracks of the rock era. Great albums, great bands, including two of rock's greatest bands releasing disco-influenced tracks. One by rock's most progressive band, and then there was another song where a hard rock band ripped off a disco group's bass line, but to this day, pretty much everyone thinks the disco group ripped them off. There's another one that has a mystery vocalist that shocked people when they figured out who it was, and then a song that we've all sung for years, even though it's about a male hooker. It's all coming up next as we count down the top 10 songs of 1980 on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember trying to decide between GoBots and Transformers back in the day, you're gonna dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. One was cheaper, one was better. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the white button and click the notification bell. Also, go to professorofrock.com to sign up for our live streams and other exclusives you're not gonna wanna miss out. So 1980 is often regarded as a pivotal year in music, marking a transitional era where diverse genres like new wave and punk and emerging rap and the increasing use of synthesizers were all making a huge impact. We're gonna kick off our top 10 songs of 1980 with a bang. And remember, I'm only counting songs that peaked in the top 40 in 1980. So even though there's some great album tracks and things like that that came out, to make it a little bit easier, we only count the ones that hit the top 40. All right, like I said, we're gonna do it with a bang, and coming in at number 10, we have a female-fronted new wave band that killed it in the 80s. It's the tune that introduced many of us to the sensational Chrissie Hynde. It's Brass in Pocket by the Pretenders.
We got brass in pocket.
Song's title actually came about after the Pretenders' first ever UK gig when they were in the communal dressing room with a band called The Strangeways. They were supporting the Pretenders. So Chrissie Hynde wanted to know whose trousers were sprawled over the back of a chair. They were kind of in the way. And one of the Strangeways, Ada Wilson, said, "I'll have them if there's any brass in the pockets." Now, Chrissie learned that brass is a northern slang term for money. And she fell in love with that expression, and that was what inspired her to write the song.
Gonna make you
Now, many hear Brass in Pocket as an anthem of girl power, but Chrissie Hynde, she insists that that's so far from the truth. She actually sang it from a guy's perspective and finds the empowering label very frustrating. Speaking to Louder Sound, she vented, and I quote, "People say there's a strong female persona driving the song. It drives me crazy. The girl thing seems to be really important to other people, but I'm mystified by it." Here comes a surprise that will be kind of a recurring theme in this countdown. Chrissie Hynde was not a fan of Brass in Pocket. You know, when it was recorded, she actually grew to despise it after it became a massive #1 hit in the UK. She actually confessed to the magazine Cream in 1981, saying, "I hated it. It was a phenomenon that evades me completely. I was honestly very disappointed it was such a big hit. I was embarrassed by it."
I'm special, so special.
Embarrassed or proud, it was the song that broke the Pretenders around the world. Now, in addition to his chart-topping success in the UK, Brass in Pocket went to #1 in Ireland, in South Africa, and Sweden. It was a #2 single in Australia and New Zealand. Here in America, Brass in Pocket peaked at number 14 and ranked number 41 for the entire year. It stayed in the countdown for a long time. So coming in at number 9 on our countdown of the top 10 songs of 1980, it's the first solo top 40 hit from one of rock's greatest guitarists. It's Let My Love Open the Door by Pete Townsend. I actually like the remix they did in '86 a little bit better than the original.
Let my love open the door to your heart. Let my love open the door to your heart.
Pete Townsend drew inspiration for this song, like many of his songs, from the teachings of spiritual leader Meher Baba when he actually started following him devoutly in 1968. The Let Love Set You Free message reflects the spiritual ideal that Pete strived for though he struggled to maintain it as he grappled with drug and alcohol abuse during this period of his life, and he would admit to that. Actually, when Keith Moon died in 1978, Pete Townshend and The Who pressed on, but tensions were running high in the band. For Pete Townshend, the strain was especially intense. His entire life revolved around The Who, from his friendships to his finances. And despite the turmoil, its creative output remained prolific, the band. Actually, The Who released albums in 81 and 82, while Townshend dropped solo records in 80 and 82. However, his personal struggles nearly led to his downfall as he spiraled deeper into substance abuse. Actually, after 2 stints in rehab, Townshend got clean in 82 and began to reflect on that chaotic period. He realized that he'd been shutting out his spiritual guide, Meher Baba, as a sort of defense mechanism to avoid confronting his inner demons, and in turn, doing something about them. In an interview right after the song took off, Pete downplayed Let My Love Open the Door, calling it just a ditty. He admitted that he actually preferred another track from the Empty Glass album, song A Little Is Enough. That one barely made a dent on the charts. I think it peaked at number 72 on the charts. Funny enough, Pete's personal manager, he initially hated this song. He claimed it didn't sound like Townshend at all, and Townshend's voice did sound different from his other recordings. He even pushed to have it cut from the album altogether. But after it became a hit, their manager called Pete to apologize, and I guess success has its way of changing opinions. The song climbed to number 5 in Canada, number 46 in the UK, cracked the top 10 here at number 9 in the Billboard Hot 100, and I love the remix from 96, like I said. Rolling in at number 8 on the top 10 songs of 80, our countdown here, it's the electronic trailblazing song that was really unlike anything in the top 10 in 1980. I'm talking about Cars by the great Gary Newman. Cars is all about how people use technology and material things to shut themselves off from real human connection. And of course, Gary told me the story behind the song. Here's what he said.
I was driving along and some people in front obviously really upset with me. So I've always assumed I must have done something and not realised, back up the road somewhere and upset them in some way. Anyway, they got out of their car and they're screaming and shouting at me, and then they're trying to open my door, and I'm locking my doors, stay in the car. And then they're trying to break them in ears. It's all in traffic, right in front of hundreds of people.
There's road rage.
Yeah. It's serious, And I thought, there's no way I'm getting out of this. I'm going to get hammered.
Here in my car, I feel safest of all.
Anyway, I ended up driving up onto the pavement, actually, drove along the pavement, sort of people leaping out of the way a little bit, and off the end of that and away. And so that's the experience that it come from. And it made me realise, again, part of my Asperger's and being uncomfortable around people, that the car for me was like a little mini tank for the civilian.
The single topped the charts in Canada and the UK, hit number 5 in Ireland, number 9 in Australia, and cracked the Billboard Hot 100's top 10 in early 1980. And it actually was one of the biggest hits of the year when the year-end countdown came out. We're at number 7 on the countdown of the top 10 songs here, and it's the title track from the biggest selling album of one of rock's greatest storytellers, a man who's phenomenal live, Against the Wind by Bob Seger and his Silver Bullet Band.
Against the wind.
Against the Wind is all about getting older and pushing through life's ups and downs. Love, heartbreak, exploration, and betrayal. The title and the repeated line Against the Wind really captured the feeling of time passing. That's what Seger was going for. He actually got the phrase from his high school days running track and cross country, where he'd literally run against the wind. Every mile fighting that resistance became a metaphor for his life's journey, pushing forward no matter the circumstances.
We were running against the wind.
One of the ingredients that makes Against the Wind so endearing, one of the great songs of the year, is that it was conceived from a very personal place. The Janie in Against the Wind actually refers to Janie Dinsdale, Bob Seger's longtime partner from 1972 to 1983. Now, according to Bob Seger, the song is about learning to tell the difference between people who genuinely care about you and those who are just using you.
Janie was lovely, she was the queen of my night.
Bob explained it this way. He said, Jenny always said to me, you let so many people walk on you, more than anyone I've ever known. And I tell her, it's just human nature. People are going to love you sometimes and they're going to use you sometimes. The key is knowing the difference.
We were running against the wind.
Now for Bob Seger, Against the Wind is intended to be motivational, to endure life's challenges and come out even stronger. He said the people in that song have weathered the storm and it's made them better. Getting through it and maintaining their relationships, that's the real victory.
Strong, we were running against the wind.
I love that quote. Also, it has one of the most unforgettable lines of the year. It's just mind-bending. When Bob sings, wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then. And how it fits in the pre-chorus is just brilliant. He sings, I remember what she said to me, how she swore that it never would end. I remember how she held me oh so tight. Wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then.
Wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then.
It's so poignant. The narrator is longing for that carefree moment when he truly believed that he'd be with Janie forever before reality sets in. We've all been there. It's hard to believe, but actually Seger almost scrapped that iconic line. He explained, I quote, the line, wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then, bothered me for the longest time, but everyone I knew just loved it. And that included his close friends Glenn Frey and Don Henley of the Eagles. So he kept it.
Watch a young man running against the wind.
Against the Wind won the Grammy for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group. That was at the 1981 Grammys. It's actually the only Grammy that Bob Seger ever won. It also advanced to number 6 in Canada, number 8 on the Billboard AC chart, and number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, traveling down a path that eventually turned platinum, selling over 1 million copies.
Riding against the wind. Against the wind.
Okay, it was technically a cover. It was originally sung by Liza Minnelli, but the track that we have at number 6 of our countdown was remade by my favorite singer ever, Oh Blue Eyes, and it became the signature version and a pop culture standard. Talk about Frank Sinatra and his classic rendition of Theme from New York, New York, of course more commonly known as New York, New York.
New York, New York.
The iconic song is from Martin Scorsese's 1977 musical New York, New York. It was composed by John Kander with lyrics by Fred Ebb. Song, like I said, it's performed by Liza Minnelli in the film's dramatic finale. It was even nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Original Song. I don't know how it didn't get the Academy Award. But John Kander and Fred Ebb credited the song's success to Robert De Niro, who actually rejected their original theme for New York, New York. He thought it was too weak.
New York, New York.
The duo had been tasked for writing several songs for the film, and when they were ready, they actually performed them for Martin Scorsese, Liza Minnelli, and De Niro. And afterward, I guess De Niro pulled Scorsese aside and said, it's just got to be a stronger song, that finale. The Frank Military, a longtime associate and former employee of Frank Sinatra's publishing company, had a knack for selecting the right songs for the legendary singer. And Military sent Sinatra a recording of New York, New York, and repeatedly checked with his secretary to see if he'd actually listened to it. Sinatra eventually handed the sheet music to his pianist, Vinnie Falcone, and by October of '78, he began incorporating it into a medley alongside New York, New York from On the Town, an old movie that he was in the 40s.
New York, New York, New York, New York.
The audience went nuts. They came unglued. They loved it. So he kept moving it toward the end of his live show because it got such a reaction. He always ended with My Way, of course. But New York, New York became such a hallmark, it became the grand finale of his live shows. It replaced My Way. It's always cool when at the end of your career, you can replace one signature song with another signature song. Only Sinatra, I'm telling you.
Part of it, New York, New York.
It actually became his first top 40 hit in years. It went to number 32, and it was his last top 40 hit.
It's up to you, New York.
I mean, it went to number 32 in the middle of new wave punk and hard rock. It also hit the top 10 on the AC charts. It went to number 2 in Canada. In Mexico, it actually topped the charts for 3 weeks, and it hit number 4 in the UK in '86.
New York.
So coming up next on our countdown, it's another track from a movie, one of the funniest comedies with a standout performance by Bill Murray. I gotta go with Kenny Loggins with I'm Alright at number 5. Now, Kenny was trying to imitate Bob Dylan, and the song has many things that made it a hit. A few that I can mention, the basic drum beat, and another is a mystery singer that people still don't realize sings backup. Here's what Kenny said about it.
Interestingly enough, we were working on the tune, and I tried to syncopate the drum part more, but the drummer was not extremely advanced as a drummer. He was pretty basic. So I had to boil the drum parts down to pa, pa, pa. And we added pa, do, pa, do, which became the heartbeat of that song because that's all he could play.
Really?
Yeah, and thank God, because it made the groove really work. And when I brought it home, I listened to it and I started laughing. It was one of the few times where I went, I got it.
Of course, the background vocals and even the bridge part, Eddie Money.
All right, right. Don't let me forget that. I wanted to layer different voices on different lines. And so I asked him if he'd come in and sing a line.
You sang the parts on I'm Alright.
Yeah, you know, he made sure that came off the record.
Oh, really? Well, I was showing it to my kids the other day, and I said, who do you think this is? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, that's Eddie Money, man. That's Eddie. Oh, yeah. They can
I'm
totally
really
hear
glad
it.
he had me on the track. Actually, you know, he's a good artist, but we just don't see eye to eye.
Let me set the record straight, because Eddie still holds a grudge that I never put his name on the label of that song, because, well, I was recording in one room in the studio, and Eddie was in another room in the studio. This was before, to my memory, before he was Eddie Money. He was this guy who was going to become Eddie Money. And I heard him singing in the studio, and I said, Guy, you want to come in and sing a line on my song? I've got this one thing. Can you play just that little piece of I'm Alright again?
Fair. All right, yeah, you can stop.
Now, that guy had some meat and potatoes on his voice. But anyway, so now that we're filming this, Eddie, please forgive me. It was actually a lapse in memory. I was not trying to f you over, dude.
Grossing over $40 million, Caddyshack was a box office hit, and so was I'm Alright. It hit number 5 in Canada and South Africa, and number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. And to this day, a lot of people, I point out that it's Eddie Money singing those backgrounds. They're like, what? All right, we're up to number 4 on our countdown. It's actually the biggest single of the year, and another song from a motion picture soundtrack that's sung by a female from the perspective of a male hooker. From the movie American Gigolo, I got the blockbuster smash Call Me by Blondie. So after his first choice, Stevie Nicks, she passed on the song. Composer and producer Giorgio Moroder, he approached Deborah Harry of Blondie with an instrumental track called Man Machine. He asked her to write the lyrics for the music. It was a task that she said only took a few hours to finish. Now, the lyrics were written from the perspective of the film's main character, a high-priced cowboy, played by Richard Gere. This was his breakout role.
Richard Gere, Lauren Hutton, American Gigolo.
Debbie explained that the lyrics were inspired by her visual impressions from watching the movie. When she was writing the song, she pictured the opening scene, driving on the coast of California. Giorgio was really impressed by Debbie's quick grasp of what he wanted for Call Me, but then he later told Billboard that recording the track with the group, with Blondie, it was very challenging experience indeed. It taught him never to work with rock bands. He said there were always fights. I was supposed to do an album with them after that, and we went to the studio, and the guitarist was fighting with the keyboard player, and I called their manager, and I quit. For the American Gigolo soundtrack album, Blondie was only credited for vocals, while Giorgio Moroder's crew played everything else, and it really pissed off the band. The song hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 6 weeks, and it remained on the Hot 100 for nearly 6 straight months. It ranked #1 for the year, for the biggest single. We sung along for years, and we don't know that we're talking about a callboy. Coming in at #3, it's one of the few bands who embraced disco with a bass line that everybody ripped off after. Talking about Queen with Another One Bites the Dust. Now, Another One Bites the Dust was John Deacon's moment to really shine. He conceived and wrote the song himself, while all 4 members of Queen contributed their own songs, each creating at least one hit. John also penned the classic You're My Best Friend. John Deacon played most of the instruments on the track, including lead and rhythm guitars, bass, reverse piano, and extra percussion. Brian May did add some guitar effects with a harmonizer during the interlude, and Roger Taylor contributed the drum loop. It's pretty cool that Deacon played all those instruments. Surprisingly, though, there's no synthesizers involved.
And another one gone, and another one gone. Another one bites the dust. Hey.
John's inspiration for Another One Bites the Dust came from his love of the dance hit Good Times by Chic. He's always been honest about that. Problem is, everybody else thinks that Chic ripped them off. In an interview with New Musical Express, Chic bassist, the late Bernard Edwards, candidly expressed his opinion of Another One Bites the Dust. He held nothing back. He said, "Well, that Queen track happened because their bass player hung out with us at our studio for quite a while, and that's fine. What's not fine is when the press started claiming that we ripped them off." Can you believe that? Good Times came out more than a year earlier, but people couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that black musicians could be that innovative. Instead, they just thought these dumb disco guys were copying a rock and roll song. Those were his exact words. What a bassist. Freddie Mercury was very passionate about Another One Bites the Dust in the group, and his energy on his vocal performance really manifested his exuberance for the song. Brian May actually said that Freddie gave it so much gusto, his voice actually bled, and bled a lot. Freddie and John Deacon felt the power of Another One Bites the Dust, but Roger Taylor and Brian May did not share their opinion. Get this, it wasn't originally slated to be a single. I mean, as ridiculous as that sounds, it wasn't going to be until Michael Jackson told Freddie Mercury, and they were pretty tight at the time, it had to be a single from the game, the album it came from. After getting a private preview of the album before it was released, the King of Pop told Freddie that Another One Bites the Dust was the smash hit on the record, no question. They actually released 2 singles first. They did okay, and the game wasn't doing very well at that point. But when they finally put out Another One Bites the Dust, it blasted up the pop charts to #1. #1 here, and in Israel and Spain and Canada. And actually, until Bohemian Rhapsody became so huge in the last 30 years because of its use on Wayne's World and going forward. Another One Bites the Dust was Queen's biggest song ever, their biggest chart hit for sure, and it became a huge stadium anthem, and it almost didn't get released. All right, we're all the way up to #2, the bridesmaid position, and it's another song influenced by disco, made by rock's most progressive band. Back-to-back songs that were influenced by disco, starting with the word another. It's Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd. Man, Pink Floyd busted the prog rock categorization with Another Brick in the Wall for sure. I mean, who would have thought that old Pink would create a song with a disco backbeat that would dominate pop radio like it did? It hit #1, and it would do so without really alienating their core fans. A lot of people don't realize that it's got that disco beat and that guitar line. I mean, the disco beat that runs through Another Brick in the Wall, that was suggested by producer Bob Ezrin, who, like Queen's John Deacon, was a big fan of Chic.
We don't need no education.
It was especially unexpected for Pink Floyd to use a disco beat, since they were known for creating albums that were meant to be listened to thoughtfully, not danced to, right? Ezrin got the idea while he was in New York after hearing the music of Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards of Chic, particularly their hit Good Times, one of the most influential songs ever. Roger Waters, the lyrical force behind Pink Floyd, wrote Another Brick in the Wall as a reflection of his complex feelings about formal education, shaped by his experiences at the it was a Cambridgeshire School for Boys, I think it was. During his time there, he developed a deep resentment for his grammar school teachers. He felt they were more focused on keeping the students in line and quiet than actually teaching them anything meaningful. To Waters, school wasn't a place of learning, it was a place of control. The wall he refers to in the song symbolizes the emotional barrier that he built around himself, a way of disconnecting from reality. Each event in his life that contributed to the growing sense of isolation became another brick in the wall, and in the story, his oppressive school teacher was just one more brick in that ever-expanding fortress. So let's talk about the children's chorus on Another Brick in the Wall. It was made up of 23 kids from a school in Islington, England, and it was chosen because it was nearby the studio. The kids were aged between 13 and 15, and they were recorded 12 times to create that effect of a much larger choir that we're hearing. The inclusion of the choir convinced Waters that the song was really coming together. He told Rolling Stone, and I quote, "suddenly made it sort of great." Pink Floyd's producer Bob Ezrin came up with the genius idea for the children's choir. It definitely validated the song's authenticity. Now, after Another Brick in the Wall grew to, the monstrous proportions, there was some huge backlash when it came to light that the kids in the chorus weren't paid, and they recorded it without the principal knowing, kind of stuck out of the school. Teachers were also upset about the fact that the kids were singing an anti-school song. In fact, right before the song was released, producer Ezrin was so scared he would hide the master tapes at night, worrying that they'd be taken away and destroyed. Ezrin talked guitarist David Gilmour to going into a disco to listen to the music before he wrote it. First, he fought it. He didn't want to do it. He finally relented, and he came back with that incredible guitar line. It helped sell 23 million copies of The Wall, and it hit #1 internationally, soared to #1 in 15 countries across the globe, including 4 weeks here in America. All right, we're at the moment of POR glory. The revelation of the track that we're naming is the best of 1980. Can you guess what it is? This was a very easy choice. At #1, I got You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC. What other song's better? There's not. It was the first AC/DC single with their new lead singer Brian Johnson, who replaced Bon Scott after his tragic death on February 19, 1980, following a drinking binge. Actually, Bon's father was the one that encouraged the band to find a new singer and continue on with their music. Bon himself is the one who said, if anything happens to me, hire this guy, Brian Johnson. So Brian shared with UK's Absolute Radio the story behind the song's inspiration. He said, and I quote, "Now the boys had a title. Malcolm and Angus said, listen, we got this song. It's called Shook Me All Night Long. That's the name that we want for this. And if you listen to the chords, the chorus just fell into place, so I can't take any credit for that one." Brian said that writing You Shook Me All Night Long was as quick as it had to be, which was the same night that the Young Brothers gave him the title. He felt a little bit of pressure because he was determined to impress his bandmates with a song that really fit the AC/DC image perfectly. Brian remembered that the inspiration for You Shook Me came from seeing images of American girls and their thighs while the band was recording Back in Black in the Bahamas. The singer came up with the opening verse. She was a fast machine. She kept her motor clean. When he theorized that cars and women were pretty similar, His words were, both can go fast, they let you down, but then they make you happy again when you see a new model. Again, his words, AC/DC's lyrics have never been about deep, sensitive themes, but you know what, who cares, it's rock and roll. I've always contended that Malcolm Young doesn't get enough credit, though, for how critically vital he was to the AC/DC sound and how he really should be regarded as one of rock and roll's greatest melody makers, truly. You Shook Me is evidence of this claim. Malcolm's thick rhythm is perhaps the most powerful component of the track. And I'll tell you what, top 3 riffs of all time, easy. I mean, the combination of Malcolm's rhythm and Angus's lead riff, they rank as one of the most potent 1-2 punches of the rock era. If you're evaluating the merits of You Shook Me All Night Long, you have to throw away the trades because it wasn't a huge hit in 1980. But it's arguably the most popular song that was a single in that year, and its legacy should be elevated to one of the all-time greatest rock songs, which it has. I mean, being the chart geek that I am, I'll tell you that the highlights for You Shook Me All Night Long was its peak at number 8 in AC/DC's homeland of Australia. It also went to number 19 in Ireland and number 29 in West Germany. To end on, I've got one of the funniest parts of an interview that I've ever done was with Jerry Harrison of the Talking Heads. He said when Talking Heads went in to record their album during the time that Mutt Lange was doing Back in Black, they recorded at the same studio in the Bahamas. I just got to have him tell it. Here's what he said.
We had all this momentum in the Bahamas, and every day we were creating really, really well. I mean, it was amusing because AC/DC was doing Back in Black in the next room. Mutt Lange is an amazing arrangement of vocalists. And he'd get these compression headings and you'd see him go, I only got yell. And then it was like, oh my God, my head's hurt. And so the singing on that record apparently is quite patched and edited together. And he goes, it doesn't happen to me live. And we'd be hanging out at the pool table with them. And Chris had gotten some snorkeling gear and I had, one day I was like annoyed at someone in the studio and Chris goes, let's go snorkeling. So we asked the members of AC/DC had they been in the water. They go, we don't go in the water. Sharks. We're from Australia. And I think they did one guitar solo and one vocal and we did all of the basic tracks to Remain in Light in 3 weeks.
Well, that's our number 1, our top 10 songs of 1980. I got to give some honorable mentions, though. This was tough coming up with these 10 songs. My honorable mentions go to Sailing by Christopher Cross, Longer by Dan Fogelberg, and Train in Vain by the only band that matters, The Clash.
Sailing takes me away longer than there have been fishes in the ocean.
My choice for solo artist of the year, Billy Joel, who killed it with his pseudo-rock new wave album, Glass Houses. Album of the year was really tough, but I'm going to give it to Back in Black by a hair for AC/DC over Pink Floyd's The Wall. And the band of the year for 1980, AC/DC. Who else?
Even if it's old junk, it's still rock and roll to me.
Leave us a comment about 1980. What are your top 10 songs? Who are your greatest artists, bands, and albums of the year? Let's have a great discussion. What are your memories of these songs? Man, what a time. The 80s beginning. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. Also, let us know what other years should we cover next. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.